So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Sunak to weaken city regulations in a post-Brexit nod to Tory donors. So essentially, he's doing this to please Tory donors, which is pretty gross, to be honest. Or at least, he's pushing ideas pushed by Tory donors, which again is still pretty gross, to be honest. So Sunak has moved to weaken regulations of financial services brought in after the 2008 financial crash, which, let's not forget, was very damaging for the global economy and the British economy. Very damaging to us. Cut a lot out of our GDP and essentially allowed the Tories to win the 2000, or at least be the largest party in the 2010 general election, which was still soul-crushing to this day. So amid fears, he's aiming to make London into a post-Brexit Singapore on the Thames, pushed by Tory donors, which is really, really awesome. The Chancellor is bringing forward a new financial services and market bill. This was mentioned in the Queen's speech with the aim of cutting red tape in the financial sector. But, he also claims he's not watering down regulation yet. He's cutting red tape, just, essentially getting rid of the legislation altogether. Then that's the only way he could spin it. Under the changes, Sunak is planning to get rid of the UK regulatory regime covering the City of London and replace it with a UK-specific one. Yeah. The Queen's speech insisted that high standards in financial service regulations will be maintained, which, when you add competitiveness, when one of the jobs of the regulators is to ensure that, the financial services we have in this country compete with Singapore, obviously it's going to mean deregulation. But the move stokes fears that Sunak is looking to rip up rules governing the banks, insurers, traders and others in the city in order to boost the economy. This move has also been condemned by 58 leading economists and politicians, so that's not very good, is it? Tory and Leave donors have been pushing for a move towards a lighter touch regulatory regime, sometimes referred to as a Singapore on the Thames model, which, again, when that financial crash hits, I think it's going to hit Singapore pretty badly. The UK is already going into a recession this year, so that's going to be fun. Sunak earlier this year said Brexit would lead to a Big Bang 2.0 in a reference to a period of when financial services were deregulated in the 1980s, which was later blamed for paving the way to the 2008 financial crash. I think that's something Carl Kalinske talked about with the repealing of Glass-Steagall under Bill Clinton, which helped lead to the 2008 financial crash. The description of the bill does not go into details about which elements of regulation would be scrapped or changed, because it's only mentioned in the Queen's speech. They haven't got that far. But it does mention reform of rules around the UK's capital markets to promote investment, and the way they're looking to get that investment is through deregulation, which, again, when that financial crash hits, it's going to hit us like a tiger uppercut. Ministers are also looking at Solvency II regulations of the UK insurance sector, which this is aimed to essentially release more capital for insurance companies and mean that they would need less kind of liquid assets in order to deal with any kind of problems they may face or any payouts, which, again, the EU are also looking at changes to Solvency II as well, so it's quite interesting. The legislation is also designed to facilitate greater trading of cryptocurrencies, which that I'm not necessarily against, because there aren't really any regulations around cryptocurrencies, and with the crash of Luna Coin, I think having some regulations would be a good idea, which, regulators have warned must be tightly controlled to prevent people losing their savings. I don't necessarily agree with that, because, again, people can, bet their life savings away on the stock market. Why should cryptos be any different? In a further deregulatory move, I was going to say derogatory there, Sunak plans to update the objectives of the regulators, the PRA and the FCA, in order to have a more focus on growth and international competitiveness. Again, regulators should not be focused on growth and international competitiveness. They should be focused on strength and stability. That's their key objective, to make sure none of these city traders are making high risks. None of the banks are risking, or the insurance companies are risking people's money in order to seek massive profits, because, again, those profits will go to the shareholders. But once it's time to pay the piper, once there's a crash or massive problems, these insurance companies, these banks will be going to the taxpayer cap in hand saying, please, can you give us a bailout, mate? Another element of the bill will be introducing additional protections for those investing in financial products to make it safer and support the victims of scams, which, again, I'm not necessarily against protecting victims more and the consumer, but, putting this into such a stupid deregulatory bill is just dumb to me. Fran Boate, executive director of the Positive Money, a campaign group for a fair economy set up in the wake of the crisis, said a focus on the growth and competitiveness of the financial sector is what led us down the path of the '08 financial crash and will mean regulators prioritising banks over the public's access to financial services as well as the wider health of the economy. And if these banks crash again, if these insurance companies, etc., crash again, that's going to have a lot of damage to the economy, and the regulators are meant to be there to protect the consumer, not to promote growth, not to promote competitiveness. The move was welcomed by the financial services industry, of course it was, because again, this will make them more money in the short term, and in the long term, it's going to cause us massive problems. But yeah, it's just madness that, the idea that deregulation, especially of something as volatile as financial services, will, long term help the UK economy. It's not going to do that. And if you have another financial crash, then, a government that claims they don't have money for the most vulnerable people in society are suddenly going to have money to bail out the banks, and do you know who's going to pay for that? The most vulnerable in society. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.